Mind Matters, where we take a peek inside the human mind to understand how it influences our attitudes and behavior. I'm Liezl Thom, and I'm once again joined by renowned psychologist Dr Eugene Viljoen, who will help us understand ourselves and the people around us a little better. Hello, Eugene.
Hi, Liezl. Another wonderful topic.
Yes, today we are talking about a very interesting topic, emotional intelligence. So let's start with the definition. What is emotional intelligence?
It is the ability of a person to control and manage and cope with his or her environment.
So how does it differ from intellect?
It refers mainly to the way in which you emotionally connect with your environment, how you emotionally interact with other people, and how you react emotionally towards different things that comes your way.
So a person with a high intellect does not necessarily have a high emotional intelligence.
No, definitely not. And I think there are many examples of those. And I think, maybe just to give one example would be that you get a child in the formative years where the child would show extreme good and well-adapted intellectual behavior when it comes to maybe understanding numbers or understanding language or being able to maybe communicate in different languages. But you might find that that same child does not have the basic aspects to handle his or her emotions correctly. And therefore, I think the whole exercise at the moment is to try and balance the intellectual development of a child with the emotional development of that child. And if you have both, you have an ideal person.
So Eugene, why is emotional intelligence important?
In the world that we live in, it is extremely important that you are well-rounded. And when you're well-rounded, you will eventually achieve your full potential. It doesn't matter if you're only intelligent and you have no emotional intelligence. You might then not achieve what you can achieve if you have a well-rounded ability in terms of having your intellectual and emotional intelligence in a form of a balance.
Can you build emotional intelligence or increase emotional intelligence?
Yes, definitely. You can do that in many different ways. And I think exposure to different contexts and different aspects in life in itself, and your ability and your want to learn about yourself and different things in your surroundings would increase your emotional intelligence as well.
So we're back to the nurture-nature debate. Is emotional intelligence something that you build over time, or is it something that you inherit?
I personally think it is something that you build over time. That's part of your character. It's part of your being. It is the way in which you interact with your environment. And it obviously comes from the way in which you've learned how to do that. How you've learned from your mistakes and from your successes as well. And the feedback that you get from your significant caregivers and the people that brought you up, and colleagues, and that. It's dynamic. I think it's fluid. It's not static.
So therefore you can also lose emotional intelligence.
That would be maybe a difficult one, because I don't think that you can unlearn certain emotional events if they're good, but you can sort of unlearn emotional reactions when they're not conducive to effective behavior.
Eugene, how about something that's considered a less desirable way of interacting with people around you, like manipulation. Is that counter emotional intelligence?
If it's done in a very bad and obvious way, I think it is maybe not necessarily deemed as good or as positive. And what is manipulation? I think manipulation in itself is maybe just that characteristic where you exploit other people for your own benefit and to the detriment of others. But I suppose when people do not necessarily feel that they've been exploited and they've participated in the whole thing, maybe that is not manipulation in itself. But if it is that, then maybe we manipulate our ways through everything on a daily basis.
Well, I think manipulation is getting people to do what you want them to do by whichever means necessary, whether you guilt them into something or whether you get them all excited with you. Isn't that also some kind of manipulation?
That is definitely manipulation. It's not really effective. And I think if you have someone that is bright enough maybe to pick up on that, you are most definitely just going to have conflict.
So how do we teach our children emotional intelligence?
Quite a difficult concept to teach, because you cannot sit down at one specific point and say, okay, now I'm going to teach you emotional intelligence, maybe similarly to what you would do when you do sex education with your children. I think emotional intelligence develops over time depending on the readiness of your child and also the aspects that might challenge your child at a specific stage. And there's no better way to teach your child about emotional intelligence as at the time when they're compromised. Let's say, for instance, in bullying or being bullied.
Is naming the emotion helpful at all to help children grow their emotional intelligence? For example, if your child is frustrated, frustration is a big word for a small person. Is it helpful to explain to the child, this, what you are feeling right now, is called frustration? And yes, it makes you want to hit me, but we cannot hit people. This is how we deal with that feeling.
Yeah, excellent example. Depending on the age of the child, you cannot teach that necessarily maybe to a 2-year-old, but you can most definitely teach a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old that is not behavior that is acceptable. And there are certain ways in which you can teach a child of 4 as opposed to maybe an adolescent. But I agree, I think it is important that everybody needs to learn and be taught about their emotional repertoire, because frustration is a very prevalent sort of emotion in itself, which shows actually how emotionally intelligent someone is in terms of how they handle that emotion.
Now, I have mentioned the example of teaching a child. You've mentioned teaching an adolescent about emotional intelligence. But what about an adult individual who seems to lack emotional intelligence? How do you facilitate that process? Because I don't think we can necessarily teach an adult anything, but we can help them learn it for themselves.
Mentoring and coaching is the way that corporations do it with their executives, in teaching them on a day-to-day basis from real-life examples and challenges that those people experience in terms of how to conduct themselves in a very effective manner. And that is maybe increasing emotional intelligence. So there is no specific exercise or technique that one can do to increase your emotional intelligence, as opposed to learn through real-life experiences.
And once again, through getting to know yourself. So if you think that perhaps you could do with a little bit more emotional intelligence, there are ways to increase it. You just have to look for them. From Dr. Eugene Viljoen and from me, Liezl Thom, see you next time. on Mind Matters. Bye-bye.